What is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Sunday, which is when I'm doing this chat. So I've been a little bit busy this weekend, been playing around with Little Miss Revlon, and gotta tell you, the tune's pretty good. Tune's real good. Unfortunately, things didn't quite go as well as I had planned on Friday night. Car did fine. Had nothing to do with how the car was running. My gas gauge isn't reading properly. Of all the things. So I data logged my gas gauge. And lo and behold, my gas gauge is off by about a gallon in change for every quarter that I'm showing. So at a quarter tank, it's actually showing to have, basically, if it shows a quarter, it's actually down a gallon. If it shows half, it's down by 2 gallons. So, now there's that. But at any rate, now that you know that, I mean, it did do a fuel yip on 2 passes, went a 1030 and a 1040. But that's okay. Figured out the issue, know how to work around that. Finished up the trans tune today. Guys, she is running really well. The data looks amazing. So, had a little bit of a blip to about 6,800 RPM. That was due to wheel spin. But 6,800 RPM on a stock cam, I'm really not too worried about that. Everything's just fine, and it just literally blipped it that quickly. Basically went, it downshifted into first at a speed I didn't think it would. It went whop whop, and that was it, but no big deal. Anyway, that's the latest with Little Miss Revlon. She's sitting outside because, well, I'm going to take her for a little blast after this, just do a little bit of tune validation. Oh yeah, one other thing, your contribution dollars at work, the Reich Thermostat is in the car. And funny story behind that, it's kind of hard to film. You know, I don't have a rig where I can set it up to show, you know, changing out a thermostat. These cars are pretty easy. But of course there's a twist. Okay, so when I originally put the TBA machine spacer on the front of that, the front cover, if I remember correctly, it said something about using blue thread locker or something like that. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just put a little bit on there and run the things down, call it good. Well, these are steel recessed bolts going into an aluminum housing. Dumb mistake to use even blue thread locker in that case. And so, just about had a freak out when I was taking the thing off, thinking I'd actually potentially would be stripping those bolts. Luckily, they held together just long enough for me to be able to remove it, put the Reich thermostat in, and I gotta tell you guys, well worth the money. The car will cruise down the freeway at an indicated, on the data log, 178 degrees, although the gauge will read 185, and I'm still trying to figure that out too. Another weird quirk is that once the car basically settles in to the temperature, it won't read below 185 at cruise. But it's actually running at 178. Adjusted the fans based on the data log. At any rate, long story short, data looks fantastic. The car loves it. If you are thinking about swapping out thermostats, I would definitely recommend the Reich. Just remember though, you will have to change some things in the tune. Primarily a P0128 code may pop up. If it does, you need to be able to kill that code in your computer, and then it'll work just fine. So, you know, we'll go from there. Doc Diff just popped up. What happened to the Milodon 160 that I sent? We'll get into that later. A lot of the 160s have been failing lately. So there's that. But in fact, a buddy of mine went through 3 of them. I've already gone through 1. So, bummer on that deal. But the Reich is guaranteed for 5 years, so luckily I won't hopefully have to go through that swap out process again, although it is pretty easy on these cars, so it's really not much to complain about. Makes a little bit of a mess, but put your plastic bag underneath to catch all the fluid and you should be in good shape. So, doing kind of a quick chat tonight. First, let me check in with everybody real quick. Michael Corleone is in, saying good evening with the arm flex. I like it. Dr. Div saying, my man, what's going on? What's up, man? Eric Taylor saying, what up? What up, Eric? Ryan's checking in. What up, man? Chris Egger saying, what up, Professor Mason? What up, Chris? Shiv Nick saying, what up, Mr. R&D? Got the arm flex and the bald guy with the shades. I dig it. Peter's checking in saying, good evening, buddy. I ordered a Hellcat conversion kit over a month ago. Still hasn't showed up. Hopefully it'll be here soon. Hopefully it will be there soon. Hilton Mode saying, what up, B? What's up, Hilton? CFL checking in with the 2 arms. I like it. Isaac saying, ran E85 kit. My car feels slower. Advanced auto dynamics. Do I need to tune it? Yeah, you need to tune it. You have to tune it for E85. You are going to have a fit with that thing if you don't try to retune it. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on if that thing does not have the tune to go with it. Dodge is asking, do you think a 180 thermostat makes a faster 0 to 60? It will... You know, faster, I mean, you're really splitting hairs, but yeah, it will, provided that you've got your fan settings set up for a 180 and that you are typically making your 0 to 60s very hot, you know, at full 212 degrees, yeah, it will help a little bit. But it's hard to see on a dyno because nobody's going to run a car up to 212 degrees before they make a dyno hit. It's just the way that it is. But taking 0 to 60 times out of it, I can tell you that on a quarter mile blast, a temperature that high, you know, coming into the burnout box at full temp with a stock thermostat is probably going to kill, I would say 6 to 9 hundredths right off the bat in the quarter mile. So, if not more, I know on the NA stuff it can kill even more than that. So, could be as much as a tenth or more. So what happened to the Milodon? The problem with the Milodon and the 160s is that they have been failing ridiculously high rate. I know. Let's see. Viagi saying, what up, B? Let's see. Oh, Dr. Diff, yeah, about my comment earlier. Yes, they have. There's a bunch of knockoff 160 Milodons out there. I had a failure and contacted them. It wasn't a legit part. Yeah, he said he hadn't had a problem with them yet. So, yeah, we'll stick to the yet. But, yeah, for sure, yeah, this Reich works really well. In fact, the Reich is working about like the 160 would have. It's basically wide open at 178. So, that makes life kind of nice. Interesting thing about it too, with it being a little bit hotter than the 180, which is really not wide open until about 190 degrees, is that the cool down feature of the car, when I'm at the drag strip, the cool down takes longer, but it takes longer because the system is convecting heat the entire time. That fluid is kind of moving around because the thermostat's staying open longer. When it does finally shut off at 170, it just takes longer for the car to warm up. So at the drag strip, I found that it bought me about, I'm going to say, without even adjusting the fans, I would say that it bought me about 30 seconds worth of sitting time. Once I did a burnout, if somebody was, you know, taking forever to get down the track or whatever, it kind of gave me a little bit of a buffer to keep that temperature low. And here's the reason for that. I noticed in my data logs that with the 180 thermostat, when I would do hard pulls with the car, I would have 0 knock retard up to, say, 196 degrees. Or I'm sorry, up to about 192, 194 degrees, 0 knock retard. At 198 degrees, though, I would for sure have that. And that would have like, you know, a degree of knock retard just fluttering around in there for really no reason. And it was weird because my knock sensor voltage was low. I mean, had a knock retard coming in at low knock voltage. So, yeah, potentially a heat related thing. You know, these are electronic parts that are bolted directly to the engine. Things happen with electronic parts when they start getting hotter. And so this is just something that I noticed, and I thought, well, man, I know that it's false. I know it's false. Just based on the voltage alone, I can't see why it would even pull timing. But anyway, went ahead and went with the lower thermostat, and it was clean the entire pass through on every run that I made. Knock sensor voltage still looked really good, but the car just, for, you know, there's no hot spark table issue or anything like that. No reason for it to do it. Anyway, kind of a mystery, a Mopar mystery. They just kind of do weird things like this sometimes. But anyway, squash that problem, and now the car, no problem with long, hard, high-speed hits. So you guys are into doing the roll racing, no prep roll racing, trips to Mexico, things like that. This is going to be something that you're going to want to look at. So either that Mylodon that Dr. Diff likes in the 160 range, or the Reich in the 170. They're both going to act basically the same. They're going to help you out in terms of keeping the temperatures low at cruise. And again, once you get to cruising steady state, that temperature is going to drop really quick. It's going to bring your temperatures down again to around 178 degrees at cruise. Certainly something to consider. Dr. saying no tune on 85 equals burnt exhaust valves. Yeah, and crazy looking fuel trims. One bad KZ1000 be one of my favorite motorcycles ever. Thank you very much. Speaking of throttle bodies, I just picked up a 2000 M5 and it has 8. Yes, it does. Feels like a German muscle car. Love it. Those cars are a lot of fun, man. Let's see. Dr. Doe saying, sitting here hoping for a close-up on the channel of one of my throttle bodies. We worked hard to make those what they are today. Yeah, you did. Sitting right there. Going to get to that here in just a second. Okay, I'll tell you what. Since you mentioned it, we're talking about parts, okay? One of the things that comes up a lot, I get a lot of questions about, are throttle bodies. This is a Doc differential 85 millimeter throttle body. You can see the logo right in there, made in the gold US of A. So anyway, this is very, very high quality piece. This is a billet aluminum through ported 85 millimeter throttle body. You say, what does through ported mean? Well, just got through porting a manifold, so I got some of my tools laying around. This is your garden variety cheapo El Grande micrometer, and set up to, let's set it to 85 millimeters. What that basically means is that the front or the back is, easier if I do it on the back so I can hold it like this, is going to actually be 85 millimeters. That shows up over there. See how it zeroes out at 85. Hang on. Get that thing set up. Just a second. That gun. I buy these cheap ones because I drop them constantly. So there you go. Be right at, or this thing isn't the most accurate thing in the world, but it should be, yeah, zeroed out right at 85. So what does that mean? It means that the air flow, this throttle body, is 85 millimeters. And again, this is a billet aluminum piece too. Real solid, real beefy piece. What the difference is, grab this again, between that and what you may see being sold as a ported manifold is just a stock piece that's been radiused, but it still has the small throttle plate. By the way, things to look for: very low intrusion on the back side of the screws, flat top up here, nice low profile, machining down of the throttle blade shaft there. All that helps the thing flow better. When you go to wide open throttle, you have a very small cross section width. That's the difference between one of these throttle bodies and one of the more cheaply made aftermarket throttle bodies, or a quote-unquote ported throttle body. Anyway, this thing's basically a piece of jewelry, and it's a shame that you can't just bolt the thing to the roof of your car and drive around. It's that good looking. But anyway, attention to detail is extremely high on this thing, and the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention, it's not just to prop up Doc differential speed, but the thing is that you've got to know what you're buying. You get a high quality piece like this, you can rest assured that it's going to be easier to tune. Your clearances are going to be tighter. This is a better part all the way around than somebody just taking a Dremel and tearing up the inside of a stock throttle body, basically trying to radius the profile going into that throttle body. In that case, you just don't see any real gains in terms of power. This is a snap gauge, by the way, something that we use us porter guys. This is something that you just would slide into whatever you're looking to measure. Pops it out. So when you don't pop it, or you don't lock it, pop it, and it goes dink like that. So whatever you're measuring, it'll get to that size. You lock it, and now you've got a gauge. So when you're getting into something and you're porting and you're trying to have a uniform opening, you just pop this thing out, get in there, and if it binds up anywhere, you know you got to work on that one area. So tools of the trade, just happen to be again talking about parts. So when you're talking about buying a throttle body, though, you've got to port your intake manifold to accept that thing, and that's why I've got these tools out. I was actually porting an intake manifold for Doc Differential, and of course he sends me the throttle body so that I can make sure that I've got a physical, not just it's an 85 millimeter throttle body, but look, here's the dimensions, mark this thing up. That way you can see exactly how much material you need to take out. So when everything marries together, it's going to be even. So again, quality parts, name of the game. If you want to at least get quality for the money that you're paying for, right? That's how you find it. So again, throttle bodies, do they make power? Well, yeah, they do, as a matter of fact. When the throttle body is mated to an intake manifold that is ported, all of the short side, long side radiuses, any inconsistencies, casting, flash, core shift. Don't get me started on that with the manifold I worked on today. Anyway, once all that stuff has been cleaned up in the manifold and you basically blueprinted the manifold, that's when one of these throttle bodies is going to come in and help you make some more power. By how much? It depends on what else you've got done to the car, but if you've got full exhaust, a tune, ported intake manifold, throttle body, all of that is going to work together in a concert, so really no one part is going to make the power. But if your manifold is jacked up the way that the one was that I was working on today, just the fact that it was getting messed with at all would help it a ton. But that alone is probably worth about 6 or 7. The throttle body will double that. This manifold could end up picking up, on this 5.7, could pick up 10, 12 horsepower. So that'll give you an idea in terms of, you know, along with the other stuff that's done to the car, this thing's going to make pretty decent gains all the way around. Again, it's hard to tell. So many other factors come into play, but the idea is to blueprint everything, to make everything flow the way that the engineers originally designed it to flow. And that's what all of this does. It helps all of those parts work and to optimize those parts accordingly. Let's see. Dodge is asking, what do you think of doing a cam stall converter 2800 header, exhaust, and tune on a 5.7? Sounds like the start to a fun time to me. Definitely do it. Let's see. Oh, 68 Barracuda's hanging out with Cass, saying shout out. Dr. Diff saying, I assume you watch Knock on all the cylinders. Didn't know you could. I'm gonna have to add that to my channels list. I watch Spark Knock, but didn't know it would do it for each cylinder. Actually, I don't. I just do the global knock. Not really looking at, you know, total global voltage, because that can, you know, I'm not going to be monitoring that. But if I'm looking at just voltage alone, and I'm seeing everything looking pretty good in general, it's basically homologating everything anyway. You know, yeah, I mean, I could dice it down that low, but considering where the car is at and the fact that it's not pulling any timing, I'm in pretty good shape. Plus, I think it's going to reference whichever cylinder is knocking. So it should be referencing highest, I think. I don't know, it's been a while since I've even messed with it, in terms of digging in and finding out the whys behind the hows. Hilton Mode's asking, what throttle body would you recommend for a 5.7 Ram? Was looking at Mo's 87. 87 is a little bit big, and let me tell you the reason why. The opening on the truck manifolds, I can open those up to about 85 to 86 millimeters. The problem is that it's like this perfect 90 degree going into the engine, and it's just, there's no real way to open that up to an 87 millimeter. Plus, the engine just simply won't flow it. But if you give Dr. Differential a shout, get you one of these, probably work a whole lot better. Again, this is going to be the 85 millimeter, and to be honest, I would recommend no larger than this throttle body for a 5.7 or for a 6.4. I just haven't seen any real solid reasons to go with a larger throttle body, even with the cam cars. In fact, cam cars can sometimes get away with a smaller throttle body, primarily because the intake runners just aren't as active. And looking at the data on that buddy of mine, Rob's car, you know, the white Charger, his KPAs look gorgeous with an 84 millimeter throttle body. So something like this 85, going to be just right. And when I'm porting the manifolds too, you got to remember, guys, is that there is, like on the 5.7 cars, that the throat actually is long. The throat's about that long on a 5.7, and it tapers down as it goes into the manifold. The manifold to the 6.4 car has this weird little jog before it makes the turn in. So none of the manifolds are really awesome. I mean, the best one out there is actually the 6.4 truck manifold. If you're looking for the best flowing manifold that's out there, it's going to be that one. But, you know, it might be splitting hairs based on airflow demands. Let's see. CFL saying, nice, just might have to have your intake in that throttle body nice and black anodized finish. Are they available now via Doc Diff? Yes, they are. Give Doc Diff a shout. He can get his, get his throttle body over to you. Gigi saying, reach over and hit that thumbs up, y'all. Yeah. Doc Diff saying, CFL, we have 2 in stock and several on the way. Nice. Just give him a shout. He's got his number up. 409-553-0759. Doc Div saying, oh yeah, saying, yeah, I can't wait to show the pictures of your port job to the customer. Definitely a jacked up manifold today. Wish we could see what was inside of it. Hopefully the customer can show me so there'd be some insight on it. So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, guys. Just a quick tip. You know, we're talking about aftermarket parts. We're going to get into filters here in just a minute. But one thing I want to tell y'all is, and this question does come up every once in a while, what about oil additives? The Lucas thickener, whatever additives, there's all this. No, don't do it. Just don't do it. The only thing that needs to be in your crankcase is motor oil. I don't want to hear nothing about no slick 50s, nothing about no seafoams. I don't want to hear nothing about nothing other than fresh motor oil in that crankcase. If you feel like you need to clean something, keep changing oil. I mean, that's what you need to be doing. Don't be mixing anything else in there. The engineers that put your engine together did not put it together to work with those types of fluids. They have completely different compressive strengths, completely different evaporative features that you really don't want to be trying to introduce when you have vehicles that have such tight tolerances like we do today. That kind of snake oil will work on an engine that is ancient, but for the newer stuff, just don't do it, man. Use regular oil and change it regularly. And if you get into a situation where you feel like you've got to do an engine flush or something like that, buddy, you've gone way past what anything in a bottle is going to fix anyway. So proper maintenance is key. Please don't add anything weird. And if you're adding something weird because you hear a mechanical knock or a tick or there's a potential failure, the thing that's in the bottle isn't going to help the crankcase. Now, yeah, it might shut up something, or, you know, adding viscosity, like running, you know, a 10W40 or a 15W50, okay, I get it, all right? But don't put additives in there. don't put something in there that is not a homogeneous, monolithic fluid. Don't put additives in the car. Anyway, the reason why I'm saying all of that, I'm being so emphatic about this, is that this customer had put something in their oil that had it super tacky. It had the consistency of like watered down Elmer's glue. In fact, it had kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's like it felt like an adhesive got in there. It's really weird. So anyway, I can't imagine what's going on inside the engine. Just don't do that. Let's see. Speed Freak's asking, hey B, would you see a horsepower difference on a 392 NA car in elevation such as Colorado, being at sea level in another state? If so, would you feel the difference? Yes and yes. For every 1,000 feet of elevation, you will lose 3% of your horsepower. And it's a linear curve. So it's at 2,000 feet, you've lost 6. At 3,000 feet, you've lost 9. And you kind of go that route all the way up. So, yeah, at 5,000 feet, you've lost 15% of the power in your car. And you're definitely going to feel that. Now, the difference is, of course, going to be in humidity and in temperature. So up in those elevations, you're going to have lower temperatures and significantly lower humidity. The lower temps and humidity lower humidity do help to bring the power up, temperature for temperature, but you'll never be able to cross that delta in terms of actual percentage points. You may be able to make up 3 percentage points. Let's say you can make up by as much as 1,000 feet just in temperature and lower humidity alone. But yeah, no, you're not going to really get any more than that. So yes, you will absolutely be able to tell the difference. That's why turbochargers are so awesome in higher elevations, because they will keep spinning and spooling up until the wastegate pops open, or until they just can't make any more boost. Whereas something, I'm always so used to pointing over my shoulder here, whereas something like a supercharger, which still sucks in air based on engine rotations, can only suck in a specific amount of air per engine rotation. So you're stuck with what you got. It's basically, you're screwed unless you got a turbo at altitude. Let's see. Dr. Div is saying we only offer the 85 now. The 95 went bye-bye with it being too big and too hard to control. Hilton saying, oh, well, I'll go the 85. Yeah, the 85 is the best way. You got to remember, guys, these 85 millimeter throttle bodies in NA form, I think the amount that they flow is like 850 or 900 CFM. So take that, for an understanding of airflow. You're never going to cap the airflow of an 85 millimeter. But what you can do with that is you reduce the KPA load in the actual intake manifold. So it's a good way to make a little bit extra power. And it makes the car feel a little bit snappier too. Let's see. DG saying, I feel like it's a little bit better to go smaller on a street car. Yeah, you wouldn't want to go 95 on a street car. But the 85 is right on. Brendan's saying, hey B, I know my Hellcat is much faster than my Scat Pack, but am I crazy by saying I think the Scat Pack hits harder? A lot of people say that, and it's true, especially under partial throttle. I've been saying this, guys, forever, and people said that I was talking crazy talk when I used to say that, look, the 392 cars are just snappier driving the thing around, and that the Hellcats just simply didn't feel like they made 700 horsepower, at least not until you were significantly in the throttle, especially for the 262 gear cars. I don't even want to get started on the manual transmission cars, but yes, the 392 has a significantly higher compression ratio, 11-to-1 versus 9-to-1, and so the tip-in throttle response is going to be sharper. The down-low torque, not talking about watting the thing, just driving the thing around, is going to be crisper. It's going to have a more abrupt throttle, so to speak. And I'll put it to you like this. Ray and I took his 1320 out that one night. And I'm telling you, it's some of the most fun I've ever had in a car. And I had forgotten just the joy of a 392. They are so snappy, so responsive, and have such a fun hit down low and through the mid-range that I mean, you forget that the Hellcat even exists. I mean, that's how fun that car was. And I'm thinking, damn, I miss having a 392, especially the new operating system that the Scats, basically all the 392 stuff's running. It's just really that good. So, all things considered, yeah, you're not crazy in thinking that. In fact, I've been saying that for a long time. The Hellcat is fun once you start really putting your foot down, but just in cruising, blipping around town, things like that, 392 is hard to freaking beat, man. And that's bar none. Take your Coyote, for example. Coyote doesn't get real exciting until, 4,500 RPM. Yeah, 6.2, yeah, I guess you could kind of make a play for it, but nothing has that off-idle snap the way a 392 does. Chris is saying, I was thinking about going with a bigger throttle body, but great information from Professor Mason and save a little bit of money. If you're gonna go with a aftermarket throttle body, you need to go with a good one. Don't get a one of these, quote unquote ported throttle bodies that aren't doing you any good. DG saying synthetic oil. I think we were talking about that a minute ago. Let's see. Yeah, you got to stick with synthetics. CFL James saying, without a tune, what could be the benefit from doing your ported intake in that beautiful throttle body, 6.4 2019? Couple of things. One, the added airflow. You're going to pick up some airflow. You're going to basically raise the KPAs that you're working with. Most of the time, the intake manifolds have got some flaws going on with them. The 6.4 is a 3-piece manifold. The 5.7 car intake is a 2-piece, and where those pieces come together, think of the 6.4, I know this is kind of a funny way to put it, but think of the 6.4 manifold as a bologna sandwich. You've got the bottom piece of bread, your bologna, and then your bread, right? So when these things come together, if there's any sliding or moving, it's not much, right? But it's just a little bit. And that little bit, you'll have little ridges, you'll have parts of it that don't, like if this part and that part are supposed to come like that, it might be over, it might be like this. A bunch of weird little things are going on inside of that manifold, and it's just cleaning it up. Some manifolds are pretty clean. I've gotten my hands on couple of manifolds. I was thinking, damn, this is really good. And brother, I've gotten my hands on some manifolds that, somebody in training must have put together. The one that is on Robert Panton's car, as a matter of fact, Quick Brick, that one is twisted and shifted, and the center section is shifted to the back. So it's all kinds of jacked up. That was the original intake, though, that I did any real extensive porting and cutting and reshaping to, because I figured if I can make that thing make power, I can make anything make power, and that was the one that I had the largest gains with, for obvious reasons. So there's that. The larger throttle body is going to make it a little bit snappier, going to pick up a little bit of power, probably mainly in the mid-range, help it breathe a little bit on the big end as well. So you don't really need a tune for that, which is good. But it would be recommended. And of course that, along with, again, your tune and a tire and everything else is what you're going to need to really optimize the car if you're going drag racing or anything like that. Let's see, Chris is saying, with having an 87mm ported throttle body on my 6.1, would I need to port the intake manifold to get noticeable gains? Yes, I believe you would. I think the opening on those manifolds is 82mm. So yeah, you need to bust out with your handy dandy micrometer, get out there and measure it up, and that will tell you what you will need to open that thing up to match your throttle body. And yeah, one of the things you don't want is you don't want the hole in the back to be smaller than the hole in the front by any real amount, because what ends up happening is that the air rushing in will basically bounce off of like the knuckles right here. It'll come in this way, bounces, and it can create turbulence. That's not a good thing. If anything, you want it the other way around. You would want something smaller in front of the larger hole so that when it opens up, you're basically opening it up with no obstructions. And so when I'm porting a manifold, what I'll do is if the throttle body is 85 millimeters, I try to open everything up to as close to 86 millimeters as I can. Some castings will allow that. Others, man, you get in there and after I'm cutting on it for a while, because this other thing that this manifold I was working on today did, again, these manifolds, there's manufacturing tolerances, and I'm telling you, this one, it had a smaller throat, and so I had to cut on it a lot to get it opened up, and it was kind of thin, not super thin. I mean, it's obviously very workable, but it was certainly different when I got done with it than when I got started. Let's put it to you that way. Boosted Hemi's asking, I have a slight delay when leaving the line at the drag strip with my Hellcat. My reaction time on the Pro Tree is bad because it will a throttle commander help? Possibly. If you're running it in sport mode though, there shouldn't be any real delay. I mean, I'm pretty nasty on a Pro Tree with my car. In fact, I'm better on a Pro Tree than I am on a Sportsman tree. And I'm pretty good for like 090, 080 lights typically on a Sportsman tree. So yeah, it possibly would help you though, just to get that thing ramped up. Bump it up to like, I think on a pedal commander, if it's got 3 up, put it on the second one. And that'll help quicken the throttle response a little bit. Make sure you're running a tire though, because it will hit that thing with a little bit more oomph out of the hole. Man, CFL James, I appreciate that very much. Contribution to the cause. Man, thank you very much. And then Speed Free checking in, also contributing to it, saying I always appreciate your help and guidance, Professor Mason. Looking forward to Mopar chat in the off season. Helps us in the winter months. Got the arm flex. Thank you very much, man. Of course, CFL didn't have anything with him on that contribution, but man, I appreciate that a ton, guys. Thank you all very much. Yeah, listen. I know it's a lot of folks are coming into the off season, and that's when people start kind of rocking back and forth, and start picking up on like I don't know, whittling and card house building. I get it. I'm right there with you. Luckily down here though, we're just getting into the good season. Let it be a dry one this year. That's what we're hoping for. Got a lot of guys looking to make a splash this year. Hopefully that didn't. Anyway, a lot of guys looking to do some really good things in this January. So, looking to break some hearts this year, as a matter of fact. I will tell you this: the way that Little Miss Revlon is running, she's gonna put a stinging on some folks. So, especially now that we know that the gas gauge is wrong. Look, there's nothing worse than you run a pass and you're going, what the hell? And you've got enough fuel in the tank. I'm looking right at the gauge. And y'all know my whole rule. You never, ever, ever run the car with less than 1/4 of a tank in it. You just don't do it. So I'm looking at my gas gauge going, well, the gas gauge is good. How did it fuel you? This doesn't even make sense. Well, it did make sense once I data logged my gas gauge. So anyway, yeah, it's about 25% off. Again, that's a real treat. Let's see. Oh, hang on just a second. Get back to where we were here. All right. Chris is asking, Dr. He's hanging out with Dr. Dipsy. I'm going to hit you up probably next summer. Talking about the build. I like it. Neil's checking in saying, could I see appreciable gains with a Hellcat airbox, imported throttle body, and long tube headers without a tune to void my warranty in a 392 Challenger? Here's the problem. Don't look for gains with the long tubes. Your lobe separation angle is just too wide. You're not going to get any real scavenging out of those long tubes. They can actually hurt you a little bit in the upper RPM range, where the stock cam does a good job having such a wide lobe separation angle. It does great at trying to drag the power up, which is good, and you need a shorter runner length on your manifold, or in this case headers, to complement that wide load separation angle. About the only thing you're going to get out of long tubes is going to be a little bit of punch down low and a little bit better tip-in throttle response. And that's really it. So I don't know that I would recommend the long tubes, but a manifold and a throttle body, I would say would probably be a good idea. And again, I say manifold and throttle body just because of how many manifolds I have ported. I'd say 9 out of 10 of them, maybe on a, if I'm being super positive, 8 out of 10 of them have some kind of significant casting flaw that would benefit from a little bit of massaging. And again, it's blueprinting the parts that you have to make them work at their most efficient. Mike G saying, since we're talking about air filters, I did the Hellcat airbox conversion of my RT for better intake temps. Should I also bother with the Hellcat filter or just keep the stock filter in there? Get the Hellcat filter. So, actually, fantastic segue. Mike, we're going to talk about filters next. So, here we go. This, my friends, is the Mala 3482. Mala 3482, immediately recognizable by the hot glue stripes going down the back. This is the old one out of the Hellcat. That's what it looks like up top. Got the grills. There's the back of it. Mala, somewhere in here, I think it says 3482. Anyway, not to be confused with the Mopar version of this. The Mopar version is going to have all the airflow data on the back. It'll say something like 600 and something grams per second in airflow clean. It'll have all of that going on. Here's the difference. This filter, even though it looks identical to the one that's in your car, it's actually got a little bit different media. This Hellcat filter completely dirty at 75 grams worth of, I think it's 75 grams, whatever it is. I don't know. I deal in freedom units, not communist mathematics. Anyway, measuring devices. This will, it's a joke. This will flow when it's at its rated maximum amount of dirt capacity. It'll flow what your Scat Pack filter flows when it is absolutely perfectly and totally clean. That's a big deal. This thing, when it's clean, will flow about 1100 CFM. When it's totally dirty, I think it flows 750 or something like that. Your Scat Pack filter, 5.7 filter, when it's totally clean, I think flows 786, and then from there it just goes down. So, bang for your buck, you can find this exact filter on Amazon. Does it have it on the back? Yeah, LX, right here, LX 3482. You can find this thing on Amazon for like 35 bucks shipped to your door. All right. But here's the twist. Remember that manifold that I was talking about earlier that I was porting and that Dr. Differential had jumped in and we were kind of joking about? Because that thing took me a full 6 hours worth of cutting to complete today, by the way. Rarely takes me that long to do a car manifold. That car also, in getting into the intake manifold, the guy's from Arizona, I believe, and the inside of that manifold had like a talky feeling to it. Like looking in it, I had Dr. Diff on the phone, and as we were talking about it, I was lamenting the fact. I was like, man, I've never seen an intake with this much casting flash. At least it's been a while, and you know, woe is me, right? Anyway, I'm just bitching about that because it's something fun to bitch about. And I asked him, I said, well, wait a minute, time out. Does this guy have a cold air kit on his car? Doc Diff said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it does. Why? And I said, tell him to get that thing off of there immediately. Get a Hellcat lower box and get a Hellcat filter. Because what was happening is he was running a filter much like this. And if you can see back here, see my hand? Okay, how much crap do you think this filter actually filters out? This is a green filter. Really, it's only good for racing. I would never, ever imagine trying to run something like this on the street. I mean, you can literally see through it, okay? Look at that. You can see the stuff sitting on the hood of the Mustang. I don't know what this looks like, but I mean, I can see my hand. I'm sure you can see the silhouette of my bald head. But yeah, when you can see stuff through it, hang on. That's not filtering out a lot. So will it flow more? Here's the twist. Look at the surface area between these two filters. Notice that this filter, this Hellcat filter, look how much larger the footprint is of that filtering media based on the size of the green filter with all this rubber and everything else here. Strangely enough, when I data logged both of these filters, this filter did better on KPA than this filter. KPA is just tuner slang for airflow. This filter, the stock paper filter, did better than this aftermarket green filter did. Even though this green filter, you can see my thumb flopping around back there, even though this green filter obviously has a media that you would think would flow better. But in reality, this one did better in actual in-car testing. So, take that fact that it did better. Now, keep in mind, did it do like super better? No, it didn't do super better, but it did do better. It did better in KPA airflow, and it did better in 60 to 130 runs. About the two best things that you can do to measure does the part work or not, and the stock filter did the better of the two. So, I mean, I can't tell it to you any other way, guys. Not to mention the fact that when you couple the fact that it did perform better with the fact that it is a OEM filter that performs to OEM specifications in terms of trapping dirt, dust, and debris, why would you ever want to run one of these filters on your car? Blows my mind, man. But listen, they make them for a reason. You know, again, I'm your guy that tests stuff to see if it works. And if it does work, and if it did work, I'd give it all the props in the world. You know how I'm hanging, you know, basically everything I've got on those Hoosier tires. Actually, they're sitting right there. I'm on the street setup now with the car. But you know, those things work. And if, listen, credit where it's due. If I don't think something's going to work and it does, I change my mind based on the evidence. And guys, this is a situation where I looked at the filter. I'm just like you guys. I can see right through it. You guys can see right through it. I thought, damn, even though it's got less actual surface area, far less pleats, the whole bit. I mean, look at that. This thing's got, I mean, look at the pleat versus that. I mean, come on. How would this do better than this, right? Guys, this is no joke. I gave this filter every opportunity that I could to get it to do better than the paper filter that came from the factory. I mean, I ran it colder. I ran it in the morning. I ran it at night. I did everything I could, crunched the data, and the paper filter, the Hellcat paper filter, won again. Now, what's my car's power number? Well, my car makes 666 horsepower to the rear wheels. It's not the king of the hill when it comes to making power, but it ain't the bottom of the bushel either. So if you've got an NA car, you ain't never gonna get to the flow capacity of a Hellcat filter. Run the Hellcat filter. You can get them anywhere. Order them online. Again, LX3482, that's your part number. Go to Amazon, type it in. Mahle, M-A-H-L-E. If somebody's got it in stock, they can get it to your door. Again, it's cheap online. At a dealership, yeah, they're a little bit expensive, about 50 bucks, but you get an air filter that flows way more than your car can ever use, and an air box that does way better than any of the aftermarket air boxes in terms of curtailing actual, you know, under hood heat. And you get a filter media that works like a filter media. And again, the whole reason why we're talking about this is to illustrate a point. I was able to ask a question to Doc Differential based on what I saw on the intake manifold, and what I saw in the intake manifold. It had a talc to it. It was like if you were to take like cornstarch, like baby powder, yeah, cornstarch, and just super lightly dust the intake of the inside of the intake manifold, and then have oil spray all over it. That's why I was pulling out. I was looking at it on my fingers, going, "What in the world is this?" And while we were on the phone, I just happened to be blowing apart the manifold, and I went, and that's when I asked the question, "Does this thing have a cold air on it?" Said yes, in fact it does, and I was able to ascertain that just by the crap that was inside the intake manifold. That filter is not filtering the air the way that something like this would. Oh, and by the way, it's this filter, this exact filter here, that I went 1016 at 135 with a stock boost Hellcat with a 309 gear. We're going to do better than that this year, and you can bet your ass I'll be running a filter, and it will be the stock filter. That's what's in the car right now. It's just a stock replacement from Mopar. Let's see. Oh, Speed Freak said, I'm leaning towards Brendan's setup. Maybe a 392 Charger as a daily and my Hellcat Challenger for the track. Good idea. That 392 seems to be fun to play with on the street. It is a riot. Doc's hanging out with Chris Hager saying, is that your Challenger at the shop waiting on PCM? If so, that's your throttle body and intake. I'm saying, I think Dr. Div I just can't recall the name of the guy on top of my head. That 426 saying, the 426 stroker 8-speed car with a Circle D 3200 torque converter. The car idles okay in park and neutral, but dies in drive, especially under hard braking while coming to a stop. Is this tune related? It is 100% tune related, unless that car has got a hell of a vacuum leak. So yes, that is tune related. I would be looking at well, your VE table for sure. If your idle's fine in park, but then croaks and drive, you need to kick up. First of all, you need to kick up your base idle, and then take a look at your VE table and make sure that you are not off there. Hilton Mode's asking if that 85 millimeter will fit a 5th gen Ram. I think it will. DG saying creates air turbulence. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's see. And again, Speed Freak and CFL, man, thank y'all very much. Chris Hager saying, Ad Dog, no sir, but I'll be sitting it down in the summer to get some upgrades. In the summer is when I can ride the bike. Nice. See, Doc's hanging out with Hilton. Let's see. DG's asking, would it make sense to make templates to port off of? Not necessarily. I could make a template that would fit over the manifold. That's fine, but the problem is you've only got so long with your cartridge rolls, and it doesn't quite work like that with these, because these don't. I don't have the manifold here. These don't have a. You don't really port match them anyway. What I'm doing is I'm going in, I'm opening them up slightly at the mouth, but what I'm doing is I'm smoothing out any transitions that are inside that manifold, taking care of any core shift or anything like that. So I do not use a template. Most experienced porters wouldn't really need that template. Besides, the other issue is that because of how these manifolds slide down on top of the head, there is still a little bit of movement there, and really opening up the actual port itself much larger than what it is, you don't gain anything from that, because it's really at the transition where the two pieces come together that all the problems happen anyway. So there's that. Dr. Div saying 6.5 hours worth of different on that manifold. Yeah, damn right, dude. So yeah, I was on that manifold today for right at 6.5 hours. And dude, I just kept cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and measuring and cutting. And that's, you know, some of them just, you got to put more work into than others. You know, some of them are, you know, pretty chill, pretty laid back. You know, again, this was just a weird casting is all there is to it. You know, again, the throat seemed like it was smaller by probably 0.5 millimeter, which is a lot, by the way. especially when you're cutting everything by hand and you're taking your time and you're trying to get everything just perfect, you know, as perfect as you can get something like this. Yeah, that 0.5 millimeter can eat up a ton of time, but there was a lot going on with that manifold. It wasn't just that. So, saying I got a little surprise coming from more Parmageddon. I like it. That's Doc Diff chiming in. CFL saying, hoping those STS 305 45 17 rears and the front skinnies and intake and throttle body with Hellcat airbox, I can run fairly consistent 1130 with no seat. Actually, you should be able to do that pretty easily. Still no word yet on final designs or anything like that, but the tire is looking to be released at the end of Q3 in 2021. So just hang tight. As soon as, you know, we get some, you know, test tires and stuff like that, I'll be getting, you know, the word out on that then. But as far as, you know, compounds or tread type or any of that stuff, mum's the word, baby. Not saying anything until the final, you know, rendition of those tires comes out. But it's no secret, STS is on the way, and we're very excited about that. Let's see. Speed Freak's asking, any thoughts into the power difference and feel of a 5.7 Ram 1500 on a tune versus an SRT Cherokee? If the Ram 1500's got 392 gears, it's going to be, obviously the SRT Cherokee is going to feel a little bit stronger because it's got more power. But the truck's not going to feel like a slouch. And if it's an aggressive tune with a 5.7, it'll just be a fun truck. But the SRT is going to feel a little bit stronger. Let's see. Hilton Mode saying, damn, my AFE cold air on my truck only does 600 CFM. That Hellcat one is nuts. Yeah, it is. Works real well. R. Edmonds saying, have a 5.7 Charger with stock exhaust. I'm about to swap a complete used Hellcat headers and cat pack system. I have a great deal on the used parts at $700. Good budget mod or a waste of money? Probably the best budget mod that's out there. In fact, it's the smartest play you can have with your cash if you want an exhaust system. So I endorse. By the way, while you've got those manifolds off of there, go ahead, if you've got the tools, try to take some of the casting flash out of the inside of the flange on those headers. Dichi's asking, recommend a keg manifold and air cleaner housing for a planned 5.7 Hemi build. Talking about a street setup. Let's see. A keg manifold. Talking about, DG's talking about for a street truck. Let's see. If it's me putting one together, I would fab my own cold air, and I would run the 6.4 truck manifold. If I were doing a 5.7 truck, that is exactly what I would do. You've already got the SRV, so you can just get an SRV extension. The 6.4 manifold is superior in every way to the truck manifold, so that's the direction that I would go. I would get a hold of Hose Pimp and get the right reducers that you would need. But I would probably just, fabricate my own cold air that would go to like the grill or something like that, pull the flaps out, go that route and call it good. That's what I would do if it were me. If you're going to stay with, well, you asked for about the intake, but if you're going to stay with the regular truck intake, the Mopar is actually not bad. That utilizes, if you've got a sport hood, the vents in the sport hood. If not, then, just a regular K&N drop-in will work too. So, although I'd prefer to see something a little bit more fancy underneath the hood of that thing. Let's see. Clutch is asking, best cam for a 392 for power and overall performance boost. Okay, so that starts to depend on a lot of things. Give Dr. Diff a shout. I put together some cams for him, and the way they break down is like this. You've got several different cams. I don't want to really get into specifics just yet, but you've got my Warlock grind, you've got the high roller grind. Those are going to be more for a little bit more outright performance. That you're looking for horsepower. Warlock is going to give a little bit better throttle response down low. Is that a mosquito? Oh, damn, mosquitoes are back. Well, they should be back. It's about 80 degrees today. That's a fat one, too. Time to bring back the body count. Looking like we're going for at least one tonight. Remember, the record is, what, 8 or 9? So, anyway, getting back to it. My sniper grind is a little bit different cam. The sniper for a 392 it doesn't have much of a lope at all. Very, very mild lope. You want to see how one runs. A cam basically, well, I designed both of them. But check out Quick Brick, Racer X's buddy, and my friend too, good friend of mine. He's got the white Charger with the blue stripes, gorgeous car. You can see his car basically just walking right out of his wife's car's life with that cam, and that cam has no lope. You never hear it, you never see it. You'll have no idea that that car that just walked away from you, up and ran away from you if you're doing a roll race, that car has even got a cam in it. And give you an idea, that car will hold its own up against a GT350R on the highway. So, you know, there's that. So, you know, it just depends on what you're looking for in a cam. If you want something that's going to really just, you know, freak you out, then I got a cam for you. But if you want something that's real subdued, real chill, something that's going to sound good-ish, you know, because it's going to sound decent with a good exhaust system, but might make you wonder if it's even got a cam, that sniper is definitely something to look for. And by the way, that is my personal grind. That's the cam that was going to go in Shalandra before I picked up the Hellcat Rebel. So a little bit of history there. Warlock was the second cam that I was going to put in there. It's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more top end power. Well, oh, he's also asking, will 305 Mickeys fit well on an 18x10 Bravado? Yes. 305, 45, 18. Oh, Art Edmonds, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Thank you saying thanks, people. Man, thank you. I appreciate the contribution, brother. Thank you very much. And just says thanks. Well, man, thank you. Certainly appreciate it. Let's see. Sambo's asking, is the stock exhaust size on the 6.1 2.5 inches? If so, would going to 3 inches free up some ponies? I think that it is actually 275, but it might be 2.5, and no, it won't really free up anything, not at that power level. You're going to need to come up with a significant amount more power for that 2 3/4 or even 3 inch, or even, you know, before even 3 inch would start making power. And again, Art, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Clutch 392 saying JLT Series 2 versus the stock Hellcat airbox. Stock Hellcat airbox, man. I'm sorry to say, but okay, look, we test these things extensively. Guys, I've been R&Ding parts for too long. And it's fun. I love it, but the problem is, I'm being honest, a lot of them just don't work, man. I mean, I'm not going to lie. A lot of them are just kind of BS. Now, that being said, any of the aftermarket cold airs, you're going to get a little bit more noise out of them. So if you have a Hellcat, you're going to get that theater of the sound to go along with the power of the car. And it really doesn't hurt performance, but it doesn't help performance either. And keep in mind, not only do we mess with these things on the dyno, where it gives the aftermarket cold air every advantage you can think of, exposing the filter to a free wash of cold air with the fans blowing right over it, with the hood up and all of that. Not only that, but look, we're taking these things to the drag strip. We're bolting them on cars that are either mid 10-second, low 10-second cars like Revlon, or low 10-second, high 9-second cars. Guys, we're just not seeing the benefit. I mean, Dude, there are, picture like this. There are a plethora, how's that for an SAT word, of guys that are running 970, 960 with the stock airbox with stock filter. They're not even running one of those green filters. So, man, I would love to say that those cold air kits will make you some more power. They just, in the real world, brother, they don't. And that's what we're finding over and over and over and over again. And it's really not until you start getting into the, let's say 970, 980 range, really not even that, I'd say 970 or quicker, and at about the 800-ish horsepower to the rear wheels, it's not until around then that you'll even start to notice any difference whatsoever on a dyno. And we're not talking about at the drag strip because we're just not seeing it. We're just talking about the dyno outright power. You're just not seeing a lot of a difference. So there you go. DG saying I love a Lopi cam on the street. Got that, no problem. Speedfreak's asking, with the tire testing you've been doing, what difference do you think a full slick would make on a Hellcat versus a dock drag radial? Well, we got to break that down a little bit. So a full slick could be a radial slick like what I'm running, which technically would be a drag radial, versus a bias ply slick, which would be like an ET drag type tire. Versus a DOT drag radial, which would be a la the STS line that's coming at the end of Q3 with Hoosier, or the current ET Street R from Mickey Thompson. The difference up to, say, man, let's say 900 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. Basically, we're talking a 970 car. In Hellcat world, not a lot of difference if we're talking ET Street R versus like a DBR Hoosier like I'm running, the drag bracket radial. With one difference though, the DBR tire for tire is going to be more consistent on the launch than the ET Street R based on track prep conditions. I feel like I could, of course, anecdotally, my car will hook on a dirt road with these DBR Hoosiers. I can't say the same about the ET Street Rs. However, even with marginal track prep, the ET Street R will hook just fine. But anything less than marginally acceptable in the ET Street R will not hook, where the DBR from Hoosier will hook. Now, the question is, are you only talking about drag racing at a drag strip versus no prep conditions, which I have now been coached to say? You know exactly what I'm talking about when I say no prep conditions on the street. You're going to want to have a tire with a compound that is more conducive to abuse on the street, whereas the compound in a DBR just won't necessarily allow for that. You will need to flip them, which you can do with a DBR, which you cannot do with an ET Street R. So there's that to consider. You can clean the feathering that you will do in those no prep conditions with the DBR that you won't have a problem with the ET Street R. Again, it comes down to the compound itself. So to answer your question, for the first 2 or 3 hits, the DBR will be superior in no prep conditions. After that, they will need to be flipped, cleaned off before they will hook again the way that they did initially. The ET Street Rs just won't hook as well, and they're dot ready, and you can drive them actually on the street. A lot of guys drive them on the street everywhere they go. Certainly not recommended for a compound like the DBR, which is not for street legal anyway. Oh, Hilton Mode's asking, I wonder if I can get a TRX airbox for my Ram. It's a great question. It would be probably a no, though, because the Ram is a passenger feeder, whereas the TRX will be a driver's side feeder. So you would have to run a car intake manifold to make that work. Mike G saying, slightly off topic, but are Royal Purple filters worth the extra cash, or is it just marketing that I'm paying for? Are there better offerings? I only go 5,000 to 6,000 miles per change anyway. Get the SRT filter. Go to your Dodge dealership, tell them you want the SRT filter. In fact, I'll even give you the part number. Since we're talking about parts tonight, let me go over to my chest here. Since we're talking about parts, this will be the part number M0041 that you will need to ask for. And this is your garden variety SRT filter for Vipers and all of your Hemis. The long version is that number right there. So that's going to be your long version. That's your short version right there. So pause that later on. That'll give you the part number. Get these filters. That's all I run. That's all I've ever run. In fact, hang on just a second. I got to get, I'm about to run out of battery. Hang on. Hang on, time out. Dadgummit. About to run this thing out of juice. Isn't that usually how that works? Right in the middle of something, battery just wants to go dead. Hard for my course anyway. All right, sweetheart, drink up. Here we go. All right. But anyway, that is the filter that you want to go with. So there's what the box looks like. You just go with a go with a filter that you know is going to work really well. Let's see, TrackPack RTs for an 0957, let's see. There really isn't the option for using a Hellcat airbox or filter. What's the best case scenario for intake on the early cars? Stock airbox and K&N filter? Yes, that is exactly what I would personally use. Let's see, Sambo's saying, or asking, how much of a role does IAT, which is intake air temperature, play on performance? My stock airbox stays around 10 to 20 above ambient during driving around on the highway, and that seems high to me. That's not that uncommon. It does play a role, but it's a role that you can really only see at the drag strip, to be honest with you. You're just not going to see a huge difference. But that being said, how much is it worth? It can be worth a couple of tenths, depending on how hot and how heat soaked your system gets. But just driving the thing around, it'll still light the tires up. Shift Nation is asking, can we interchange PCMs for California smog only, stock versus unlocked? You can. Just keep in mind that if you ever try to get any warranty work done, it will throw a P1405 code, more than likely. But yes, you can swap those in and out. You just have to buy the other computer. Let's see. 8-speed RT saying, I have a stock everything on my 5.7, run 1303 at 109. Do you think I could benefit from a tire and intake? Yes, you could. Yeah, absolutely you could. There's a few guys out there running in the 12s with those things. Let's see. Also asking, what is the smallest size, I think you're saying tire, I can fit, what is that, Tim, on the back, on the rear of my 19 RT, oh, rim. You get 17s on the back of it. I don't know if you can get 15s though. Xcash is asking, is the Hellcat filter better than the shaker cone filter? Funny you should ask this. Racer X and I were chatting about this. For the NA cars, the shaker setup is actually my all-time favorite, mainly because it's getting fresh air blown into that filter area from both sides. I mean, it's drawing some from the fender, some from up top. It's not a ram air. It's not a sealed box or anything like that, obviously, but it's got some cross flow going with it. That's my favorite. Is it better? It's better in its enclosure than that type of filter that you would find in the Scat Pack with the shaker. But as a unit, I like the shaker better. In fact, we were talking about, man, how could I put a shaker setup on my Hellcat? Anyway, again, it's one of those things where I like that system better for the NA guys, but it's going to be real hard to beat that Hellcat filter for 99% of the guys that are out there. Let's see. Yensley's asking, where are you located? Houston. Saying, I want you to work on my truck. Give Doc Differential a shout. He'll be more than happy to. Let's see. 8-Speed saying, thank you, man. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Let's see. So getting back to it, throttle body stuff, you want to make sure that you're talking about, when you're talking about the millimeter of size, this is what they're talking about. Basically the size of, they should be talking about the size of the butterfly, not just the opening. You need to be talking about the size of that butterfly. Again, some of those ported, and I use that term loosely, stock throttle bodies, all they're doing is radiusing the inside of the housing. And the thought process on that is to give better airflow through the housing itself. The problem is, haven't seen any gains from it. I tested one on Shalandra. Imagine that. I tested something. Wow. Did it work? No. Wow. Big surprise, right? Look, guys, it just didn't work over what the stock throttle body was given. Now, when I went to the Fastman 84 millimeter throttle body, it did pick up. Picked up a little bit of mile an hour, and it was a little bit snappier. So again, it was a part that worked, and that's why you'll hear me mention, or you've heard me mention that throttle body over and over again. Even though I'm not sponsored, I don't get anything for this. Didn't even get a freaking thank you for that matter. But I know that a lot of folks were trying to pick up Fastman throttle bodies at that point. But again, you know, when you start talking about these parts, I mean, you want to make sure that you're not being misled. And that's why I wanted to visit with you guys on this topic tonight, because these are some questions that I get asked regularly. Throttle body, intake manifold, air filters, in this case, oil filters, oil. These are things that do get brought up. And so in chatting with you guys about this, I'm hoping that my experience and that my R&D and all this testing that I've been doing over the years, I'm hoping that it's helping you guys to make informed decisions when you go to scratch out those orders for these parts for your cars. I want to make sure that you are spending your money in the right direction. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've bought a part with these pie-in-the-sky claims in terms of power, and it's going to do this and that, and you call them up, oh yeah, you'll drop 2/10 in the quarter mile if you put this widget or, you know, combobulation on your car, only to find out that not only in some cases did the car not go any quicker, it went slower. You know, and you call them up and go, what happened? I thought you said this car is going to go faster with this part. Well, it could go faster. Like, yeah, okay. And my aunt could be my uncle if she had a package, bruh, but it didn't work out that way. So, anyway, when you're talking about these parts too, another thing you want to consider is the quality of part that you're buying. I mean, you can look at this housing. It's a billet housing. This thing started off life as just a block of aluminum. And it goes through a CNC process, an anodizing process, comes out looking like this. I mean, this is freaking good looking, solid. Again, it's a piece of jewelry, man. It's a shame that this thing isn't just strapped to the top of your car so you can show this thing off. Quality part, man, it's tough to beat when you're messing with parts like this. Make sure that you're spending your money wisely. And again, that's what I'm trying to do, guys, is just bring you guys along for the ride a little bit when it comes to what parts work, why do they work, why don't the other parts work. That's what I'm here to bring you guys up to speed on, and hopefully we all kind of learn from it together. HB saying thank you, man. Sambo's asking, have you ever heard of Y-Tech throttle bodies? They're like a knockoff eBay one. No, haven't heard of them. Let's see. Oh, Mike G saying current gen 345s use the tiny little MO339 filters. Yeah, I know. And they have a weaker bypass rating than the 899 SRT filter you just mentioned. Does the 345 benefit from that higher bypass, the SRT? Man, I'll tell you what, I liked them. I used them on the work truck. I used them on the old work truck. 392s, the 6.2, everything gets that filter. So I'll tell you this, I haven't ever had one fail, and they work really well. So I don't know about if they have a use for the higher bypass, but they seem to work pretty well on those applications. Arthur Wall saying, such a beautiful big bore throttle body. Yeah, that thing is pretty nice. Let's see. Sambo's asking, would that be worth it or save my money? No, I would say don't. If you're going to spend your money, man, look, you want to cry once or cry twice. I have always been under the impression that if you buy known high quality parts, you're going to be, if nothing else, hopefully buying into customer service. A lot of times the cheapo parts, they don't work, they break, or they work great for just a little bit and then something sketches out with them. A lot of times it's tough to get your money back or to get anybody to work with you on the back end. In this case, I don't even know how much these things cost. This was sent to me for measuring purposes for that manifold that I was working on today, but it's so damn pretty, I just wanted to show it to you guys. Also comes with its own hardware too. Comes with some higher quality Allen key bolts as well. Forgot to mention that. No, you're gonna want to buy this. You're gonna want to buy higher quality. Whatever you're messing with, buy the higher quality part. In some cases, your sanity will thank you more than anything else. Perfect example of that. Foxy right here. Foxy has had I keep this thing right here because I think it's so cool looking. Fluidine radiator. This is Fluidine radiator back when they used to give you a plaque that was riveted onto your radiator. That came off of the radiator that finally failed in Foxy back here. That radiator was about 17 years old. Aluminum radiator that lasted for 17 years. It's saying a lot. So again, it's not the cheapest by any stretch. But it was certainly the highest quality then, and I would argue it's still the highest quality now, and I take that mindset with everything. Let's see. Trackpack RT's asking, would a 5.7 with long tube headers and an HRT Stage 2, which is a 220, 230 cam, benefit from an upgraded throttle body, or would the stock one flow more than enough for the application, 410 to 420 wheel horsepower? The stock throttle body will absolutely flow it. That's 80 millimeter throttle body, just like what the 392s come with. So by that standard, then yeah, I mean, that's what 392s make to the rear wheels from the factory. But you would be better off with a ported manifold and a larger throttle body, just because you're going to want to spin the thing faster with that manifold, with that cam. Now, true, your intake runners will be less active with that cam, the aftermarket cam, but the RPM is still going to want that higher flow. Plus, just in general, you're going to be commanding or wanting more flow through that apparatus to begin with. So I wouldn't necessarily say the larger throttle body is going to help you, but the larger throttle body, when paired with a properly ported intake manifold, will. So it's a concert. Not one piece plays the biggest part. Everything together makes the music. So get yourself a ported manifold, get yourself the larger throttle body, and those two things together are going to be what helps you. Let's see. DG's asking, what are your thoughts on the Hemi roller tappet failure issues everyone's complaining about? Man, as somebody who has had a vehicle fail a set of lifters, I can tell you that there's several different reasons for the failure. One was just bad metallurgy. When Magnetti Morelli did the lifters, I forget the year, 2014, I think like halfway through 2014, the number of failures dropped quite a bit. They didn't go to zero, but they did drop by quite a bit. The thing is that there are vehicles that have, in our fleet, keep in mind, my region alone has 23 or 25 of these Hemi-powered tradesmen. And of those, we've got about half of them now, over 150 to 170,000 miles. We have a few of them that are over 200,000 miles with no failures. So it's kind of hard to say, there's no real rhyme or reason as to why some would fail and some wouldn't, aside from the fact that maybe it was just a bad batch of parts for the lifters themselves. I know that there was some talk about oiling and all this other stuff, and I just don't see it. You can't design an engine that doesn't oil the camshaft or the lifters. It doesn't, seriously. You may have seen the videos. If not, I have a hard time walking along in lockstep with that. Especially when you consider the fact that a lot of the trucks in the fleet that I work with spend a lot of the time idling on job sites. So there's that. My work truck, the one that did fail a lifter, never idled at any point in its life. That truck spent almost all of its life on the highway and not stuck in traffic. That thing was running back and forth all the time at 75, 85, 90 miles an hour with a 392 gear. So it's not that it was stuck in traffic idling, it was buzzing down the freeway with a more aggressive rear gear than most. So that logic of idling, by the way, gets kind of thrown by the wayside in my truck's case. Again, I think it was just bad metallurgy with the lifter itself. That, along with a slight change in how those needle bearings are oiled, I think basically has cured the problem, or about as cured as you can get. Because don't forget, GMs were failing lifters also. It just didn't quite get the press that the Hemis did. The DOD issue, DOD lifters, a bit more complicated than a normal lifter. Although it wasn't just the DOD lifters that were failing, a lot of them, say half of them maybe, were the DOD lifters. In our case, MDS, which is multiple displacement systems. DOD is GM slang for displacement on demand. It all both means the same thing. Josh is asking, can we run 10W40 in our Hellcats without issue if we live in a hot state where it never gets snow? Yeah, you could, although there's really no reason to. And the reason why is that at some temperature, that 10 is going to really be 0. You got to remember that you're not really buying yourself anything by going to a higher winter grade weight, so to speak. It's viscosity. And that viscosity is at 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. You're not going to be at a 10 viscosity of oil at 32 degrees Fahrenheit ever, if ever, where you live. If that's the case, then what's the difference going with a 0 viscosity oil at 0 degrees Celsius because your oil is already going to be at that specific viscosity. Basically, that's a lot of garbage to tell you it's not going to do you any good to switch, but it's not going to hurt you if you do decide to switch. I would always stick with the manufacturer's recommendations. If you plan on running high temperatures, like real high oil temperatures, take a look at the hot viscosity number at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the boiling point of water. That's why it's rated at 0 and 100. Take a look at that viscosity. Most of the time, 40 weight is going to be around 1300 CSE, which is basically 13 viscosity at 212 degrees. For a reference point, your typical 10W30 or a 30 weight oil is going to be at roughly a 10 CSE or a 10 viscosity at that 212 degree number, 100 degrees Celsius. That's the viscosity that the engineers have in mind for oil pressure, oil flow, all of that at that operating temperature. That 212 is kind of the magic number, by the way. Primarily because the boiling point of water that gets all the vapor out of the system, pumps it through the manifold, gets taken care of, and it's just oil left in that crankcase. The lower that number, the longer it takes for that moisture to evaporate out of the system. So that's why you ever wonder why everything's like 212 degrees, why is my thermostat 210 and all this other stuff? That's the reason why. But again, it's 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. It's not going to do you, I doubt very seriously that it would hurt. The only time that would potentially sting you is if the temperatures did get low. You know, in the 32 to 29, 28 degree range, and you had to drive the car. Chances are you're not going to drive the car in those conditions anyway. I get it. I completely understand it. But really, why would you even bother with a higher winter viscosity when you're driving the car primarily at operating temperature? In that case, you know, a move to a 15W50 might be a better play if you're going to be road racing the car and all of that. But again, you know, you can't get on it in the car until your oil temperature gets to a viscosity that plays well with all of your bearings and your wear surfaces. But for road racing or something like that, that might be the smart play. Again, I'm just kind of working you through how engineers, MDE specs are going to look at oil viscosities and what those viscosities are. And again, they're just benchmarks. You know, when you hear 10W30, what does that mean? What it means is that at 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that oil will act like a 10 weight oil would act at 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The 30 part means that the oil is going to act like a 30 weight oil would act at that temperature, meaning 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That 30 weight oil at that temperature is obviously not going to be a 30 viscosity. And I don't know why the weight thing even comes into play, because it's not a weight at all. It's a viscosity. Anyway, that 30 viscosity oil is not going to be 30 viscosity at that temperature. That's at a standardized temperature of like 60 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, it's going to be a 10 viscosity, a 10 weight, so to speak, at that temperature, 212 degrees. And then, of course, it's a sliding scale where it's going to fall in the middle. That's for a multi-viscosity oil. If, on the other hand, you were to take a straight viscosity, like a straight 30 weight or a straight 40 weight, what that means is that it is a 30 weight oil, period. So if it's 0 degrees outside, it's going to flow like a 30 weight oil would flow at 0 degrees, which means it's going to come out of there like molasses. Which is why back in the day, sometimes you couldn't start a car. There wasn't enough cranking amps or starter to spin the engine because the oil pump was trying to turn what is in effect like this, like honey. I mean, it's not even honey. I mean, it's just like this viscous clump of shit, right? So anyway, at 30, in the same weight, that 30 viscosity would act like a 30 weight oil would at 212 degrees, which would mean it'd be basically a 10 viscosity oil at that temperature. So in other words, that's your scale. Really thick to thin, whereas a multi-viscosity goes thin and it tries to maintain that specific viscosity across the board. Little wonder why, if you notice, a 10W30 was so popular and a lot of people gravitate towards it. It is a very consistent viscosity throughout a temperature range. In other words, at 0 degrees, it's a 30 weight, it's a 10 viscosity, and at 212, it's basically still a 10 viscosity. That's why 10W30 was so popular for so long. So hopefully that gives you an idea. By the way, 40 weights, again, around 13-ish, 12 to 13 viscosity at those temperatures. 50, I think, is around 15 viscosity at those temperatures. So just something to keep in mind when we're talking about oil. Trackback saying, thanks, B, you're the man. Thank you very much for hanging out. Queasy's asking, what's the car you had the least fun in? I don't know that I've ever had a car that I had no fun in. Let me think about this for a minute. Probably one of the Vipers. Once I got one of those cars to around 1,000 horsepower, the car quit being fun. It was work at that point. And keep in mind, this is a Viper. There are no nannies. There's nothing there to keep you from, well, there's nothing there to protect you from yourself. You just don't know the feeling of, you know, a fairly short wheelbase car with that kind of power and with the suspension geometry, or what passes for suspension geometry in those cars. When you start to lose contact patch on the rears because of undulations in the road, things like that, at about 170, 180 miles an hour. And you're wide open throttle hitting it with a 200 or a 300 shot. It's kind of a job at that point. So I would say that was, it sounds fun, but I don't know that it was fun. Let's see, what else is there? That's really the only one I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, I've always had fun with stuff, whether it was, you know, a Samurai. Hell, y'all saw what I did in the minivan. That thing was a riot. There's nothing that I really ever haven't had fun in, except for when I got a little bit too extreme with something, and that's when it quit being fun. Sambo's saying, fair enough. Thank you, brother. Thank you, buddy. Modern Red Hemi's asking, ProCharge 5.7 Hemi stick with 5W20, which is recommended, or 040, or something different. Live in Maryland, which gets all 4 seasons. I would probably switch around. I would say in the summertime, 040 would be just fine. During the wintertime, I would have a hard time moving away from 040 because you have a 0 weight at startup, which is better than your 5 weight with your 520. And you're a Pro Charger, so you need a little bit more cushion. I would say 040 would be what I would go with all the time. I don't see any reason to go less than that because you don't go less than 0 for cold, right? And your 20 weight is only there when the car warms up. And I would rather see you have a little bit more cushion. So stick with 040. I really wouldn't mess with any other oil. Sambo's asking, last question, which oil do you think is better, AMSOIL or Redline? I can tell you that AMSOIL is done better in Blackstone Labs UOAs, which is Universal Oil Analysis. And it's also done a little bit better in independent testing from what I've seen, although both oils, when I say a little bit better, they're already both really good. They're going to probably test fairly close to each other. I would probably pick AMSOIL before I would pick Redline, but it's tough to call Redline a bad oil. So, you know, whichever one you can get your hands on the easiest, go with that one. The main thing with that, guys, is just please make sure you're changing your oil. Just because you buy AMSOIL doesn't mean that it's the last oil change you're ever going to do. Maintain your vehicle properly. Change your oil at the recommended intervals. If you're beating on your car, change it at 4,000. If you're really hammering on it, change it at 3,000. These are things that you can do to help to extend the life of your engine, to make life a lot easier. It keeps you in contact with your vehicle. You start to notice things. If you get underneath there, you see things are a little bit wet with oil, you might have a leak. It gives you an opportunity to nut and bolt your car while you're underneath there. Just poke, prod, make sure that bushings look good, the whole bit. Change your own oil if you can. If you live in an area where you can, do that. That'll give you that opportunity to get a little bit more involved with the car and to, pick out some potential issues. If not, take it to your local haunt. Just, make sure that you're doing it regularly. Let's see. Mike G saying, promise this will be my last question about oil filters tonight, but will I need more than 7 quarts if I jump up from the 339 to the SRT filter on my RT Challenger? Probably not. If anything, it might just, just stick with the 7 quarts. I think you'll be fine. You'll still be within your range, for sure. But no, you'll be just fine. Stick with the 7. Don't go crazy with that. But at least you're changing your oil. Change your oil. Change your oil. 9X is asking, would you get a new crate engine with forged internals and reworked heads, or is it good enough to install forged drop-in pistons and rods with a camshaft kit on a 6.1 Hemi? Well, man, it depends on what you're going to be doing with the car, but I'll tell you this. You are probably going to be fine with just a dropped-in rotating assembly. Go 10 over, send the thing to the machine shop. Or get your crate engine if it's in the budget. I mean, if it's in the budget to have it all done, it needs to be done right. The drop-ins, the only problem with drop-ins is that there's no accounting for vehicle maintenance, how the vehicle has been used, or abused in this case, how often the oil's been changed. So what can end up happening is you'll get a ring ridge at the very top of the cylinder, and that just comes from lots of high RPM. Can come if you're not changing the oil very regularly, and it's where the ring is just starting to wear out the cylinder. So what you're going to want to do in that case, if you're taking it down this far, hit up a machine shop and just have the whole assembly gone over, and it should be like a 10, maybe even a 20 over piston installed. And at that point, you can go with rods and whatever else you want to do. Let your imagination run wild. But what I would certainly not do is I wouldn't just put in just drop-in pistons. At this stage of the game, depending on mileage and again how the vehicle has been used, I would prefer, especially if we're talking about buying a crate motor at this point, it's a whole lot better to buy the crate motor, pull what you've got, put the drop-in in. If there's a core charge or something like that, ship your old stuff off and just don't worry about it, or sell it outright. Somebody may be looking to do like a 426 build or something like that. Could be right up their alley. So you can always get something for it, but in my personal opinion, I would far and away prefer to get the crate engine and go from there. Modern Red saying, thanks, brother. Got the arm flexes. I like it. Well, guys, hopefully I've answered some questions for you guys tonight. Again, let's go through the parts just so that we can have the part numbers for you. Here's the part numbers for the SRT filter. I put this thing on everything. So there's your main part number, M0041 up here. You can also find it right there. That's what it looks like. So there's that. Again, if we're talking about air filters, you're not going to do better than the LX3482 filter. That's the Hellcat filter, easily identified by the stripes, the hot glue that's kind of keeping these pleats from moving around on the back, versus that green filter, even though you can see through it, kind of already established that it doesn't filter very well, and Again, it's because of a filter like that that I was able to diagnose, or it surmise, I should say, that a car manifold that I was working on did not have a paper filter in it like that Hellcat. By the way, the Hellcat filter, when it's clean, flows 1100 CFM. When it's dirty at the 75 gram capacity or whatever it is, flows roughly 750 CFM. Far more than any naturally aspirated car is going to draw, at least most naturally aspirated cars. I mean, 440, 426, maybe a little bit more. But even a 392 is going to have a hard time outflowing that filter. And again, when we're talking about throttle bodies, you want to go with something like this unit here from Dr. Differential. Again, a 100% through body product. Again, 85 millimeters straight up and down through here, not a ported, you know, housing, but the blade itself is actually 85 millimeters. That's what you're going to want to go with. When we're talking about aftermarket throttle bodies, it doesn't get any better than this. Solid chunk of billet aluminum was used to make this thing. That's how beefy this is. And again, it looks like a piece of jewelry. It's a shame you got to have it under the hood of your car. And that's it, guys. Let me check in with the rest of y'all, and I got to bounce. Not actually saying wish you were local. You should franchise some shops. Man, I wish I could. Smoking at 5 saying I just logged in. You should sell some Mopar chat online shirts. I'd buy one. Be on the lookout. I should have some more coming relatively soon. I just need to place the order. I typically get medium, large, and extra large. So, but hopefully here in like the next week or so, I should be placing that order. And last question, let's see. DG's asking if you were going to change the cubic inch on a 5.7, what would you prefer? I would probably go with the 372. You can go 392, but the problem with that is it's a small bore 392, and I don't really like the small bore on that. I think 372 would be a little bit better. Although the 392s do run pretty good. They make a lot of bottom end torque. I like the 372 because it's kind of a tweener, and you can, you know, cheat some RPM out of it still, and it works pretty good. So just something to think about if you're looking to ooh, haven't got a Skeeter yet. Anyway, if you're looking at bore and stroke a 5.7, that's the way you can go. Although I will say this, for the amount of work, time, effort, expense, headaches, heartaches, tears that you're going to go through to make a 5.7 that big, just buy yourself a 392 short block. It'd be a whole lot easier. You get the benefit of the big bore that helps the heads, unshrouds the intake valve. That's the big problem there too, is that you know, these engines have big valves, and big valves need big bores so that they can unshroud and actually get the best flow capacity that they can. Even though the valves are canted and all that, they still benefit from the larger bore. DG's checking in and saying, thanks, man. Dig the show. We'll be back. Thanks, man. Hopefully we'll have you back soon. So we're a little bit off schedule this week, by the way. Normally the show is on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I was just super tied up yesterday. But we will probably be back on our schedule coming this week on Tuesday and probably on Saturday-ish. We'll see how all that works out. Especially with the holidays, things get a little bit wonky. Of course, you guys can understand that. But hey, if nothing else, you can throw this thing on in the background and you know, listen to Mopar chat to your heart's content. And guys, with that, we are going to check out. So as always, love each and every one of you guys. Stay positive out there. Keep wearing your mask. If not for yourself, and do it for others. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep it shiny side up. God bless, and we will catch y'all on the next one. Thanks again. Appreciate each and every one of y'all, and we will check back in with you on the next one. That's a wrap. Adios.